Hello everyone, it's Redstone here again, and as you might be able to tell, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I've had quite a few requests to see the redstone behind a few of my courses, and for a while I was a little bit hesitant, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized, yeah, it's a good idea to go ahead and show it and let people try to learn from it. Because the only way that we're going to get new innovations in redstone is if more people understand it and can start seeing things in a different way than may have been seen before. But in order for you to follow my train of thought on my circuits, I'm going to have to explain a little bit about programming. Now, I know that seems a bit off, but programming and redstone have a lot in common. There's quite a few different things. For example, if I switch over to this window, the main thing that you have is a variable. For example, in PHP, which is the main language that I use for web coding, you declare a variable by putting the $sign and putting in a name for it. Now I hate that it does that. Wish Minecraft didn't do that. In Minecraft, this can be seen as an input signal. We usually consider these buttons, levers, or anything that a user can interact with, but that's more of declaring the value of a variable that input is considered. With redstone, more inputs are about the logic gates. For example, we have an AND gate as soon as I finish building it, of course. In which case these are the inputs, or in coding terms, the variables. Now, of course, in coding you have to do special things to set variables. In most computer programming languages, PHP is a web page programming language, which is slightly different, but that's not what we're going to get into right now. The main difference between the two, though, is that in computer-based variables, each variable has to be declared as a specific type. For example, there's int, there's char, there's string, there's bool, there's float, and there's double. Now, int is an integer, and that's any whole number, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. A char is any character, so that's A, B, C, D, E, F, so on and so forth. I believe that symbols count as characters too, as do spaces and numbers. Now, a string is a string of text, so it could be a word, or it could be a phrase. It could be anything like that. A bool is a Boolean. Now, this is the most like redstone because redstone is a binary signal. You can have on or off. Now, likewise, Boolean is a special type where it could either be true or it could be false. It can't be anything other than true or false, and it could also be represented as 0 or anything else. 0 is false, anything other than 0 is considered true. If I'm remembering correctly, I might have that backwards, but yeah, I believe it's 0 is false, anything else is true. Float is a decimal number, and it has a certain limit to how accurate it can be. Double is that same thing. It's a decimal number that has actually a further accuracy than the float does. So a float can only go out to a certain point, double can go out further than that. But since redstone is binary, we're going to be working specifically with Booleans. Oh, that's how I can avoid it. So as I said, the redstone signal can be on or off, which is binary, of course. And then what do we do with those variables that are true or false? Well, we have our logic gates for that. That compares them, that combines them, that does all sorts of neat things. And that's similar to what is known in programming as operators. So operators can compare, like the AND operator, the OR operator, the NOT operator. To compare two variables, you have is equal to, is not equal to, is less than, is less. Wait, does that? I think it's that actually. It's been a little while since I've actually had to use the less than or greater than. More commonly, I use less than or equals or greater than or equals because I use those for loops, which I might get into a little bit later. But we also have the common operators for basic math. You got plus, minus, times, divide. And there's actually a little bit more than that, but for our purposes here, we aren't going to go into that. So, obviously, the AND operator is a lot like an AND gate. OR operator is like an OR gate. The NOT operator is like the inverse gate. And you actually have to combine operators in coding to get things like an XOR, which I haven't had to build an XOR in a while either, it seems. Dun dun, no. This, and this, boom, boom. Bum ba dum bum ba da dun da. No, that's one too far, I think. Oh, it's been a little while. Or is this an XNOR? I get the two confused sometimes. When using operators like in the same manner that you would use a logic gate, you use an if statement. So we say if our variable, nope, don't need that space, is equal to 5. Wait, no, we want to do. Okay, this is a little bit complicated for me at the moment. So if, let's say we actually have to do two variables here to do this example for the XOR. Now, as we know, an XOR gate only works if the two are not equal to each other, so that's, in coding terms, we could do this to do the same thing. And PHP, close the brackets. And that continues on. And a redstone circuit is pretty much like coding. You have certain things that, if they are true, then you do this, that, and the other. So then we move on to, let's say, a redstone clock. That's a lot like a loop. So one of the most common loops I use is this one, the for loop. And the reason I use the for loop, let me go ahead and finish typing here real quick. Yes. Now I'm about to use one of the, that's add one operator in coding. The reason I use a for loop is because it's very easy to set up. I don't have to create new variables. I don't have to keep a counter because the counter is already built into it. It starts off with the variable I equaling 3. It increases it by 1, and then it also, well, first it reads it, checks it if it's less than 10, then increases it after executing the code, and then if it is equal to 10 at any point in the loop, it shuts it down. The way that a redstone clock differs from this, however, is that it does not have a built-in cutoff point. So it's basically an infinite loop. Which is also why it causes lag on servers. Now, why infinite loops are bad is they hang up code. You could have this really nice program, but if you did not set up your loop properly and it goes infinite, it will never stop looping. You'll just keep on going and 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 going, just like a redstone clock. And that's not good, especially for servers, in the case of Minecraft redstone clocks here. In the case of coding, you could actually you can actually crash your computer with an infinite loop, which is why it's always a good idea to have a failsafe in case you didn't close the loop properly. But then there's one other thing. Now, with all coding, you have all these things, and you have certain pieces of code that you repeat over and over again. And if you just type them out each time, that gets very bulky in your file size. You're using up more space than you need to use. And that's where functions come in play. So let's go ahead and name this function test. Now, what can we say is really like a function? The closest thing I can think of in Redstone to a function is the piston tape, because it has a set thing that it can do. You have little on-off places in it, and each time it goes around, it does the exact same thing. It triggers the exact same mechanisms. So it is very much a function, but not quite enough on its own. Once you factor in the other logic gates and everything that you branch off of it, that do little tests comparing what you have in the piston tape to the inputs, then you have more of what is like a function. So just real quick, let's go ahead and input variables $A and $B. So then let's say, oops, sorry, I have if. It's not equal to $B. And this little spacing thing I'm doing is more for convenience when you're typing. When you're coding it, it's very easy to get lost in your code if you don't put in the spaces, because everything's on the exact same line. It's kind of hard to tell what goes into what. So it's common practice to go ahead and do the spacing. That way you can tell what's part of what. And that's very similar to how some people will have specific parts of their circuits in different color wools. Something that I don't practice all that much because I don't build a lot of complicated circuits anymore. When I was building more complicated ones, I was definitely making sure I did that. For this one, we'll say and then we need an else because, yeah. Whoop. And there we go, we have our basic function. So basically what we're saying is, let's say we're going through an XOR gate a whole bunch of times, and each time we're testing to make sure that the two inputs are different. So what I did here is I put the return variable as hello if they are different, else if they're the same, it'll be goodbye. And that's basically like having two different branches of your circuit, each one doing a different thing. And of course I have to put what it returns. So I will be, well, actually let's think about this for a second. Let's review over what we talked about here. So we have variables, which are like your inputs within your circuit. And that doesn't just have to be where the player inputs a value at a point. It could also be inputs to individual positions of the circuit. And we said that the Redstone circuit inputs are Boolean type variables because they can be true or false, 1 or 0, on or off. We went over how logic gates are operators and how they're similar to how operators are used to make comparison between variables, which if you're familiar with Redstone, you'll know that already. We have the infinite loop of the Redstone clock, which is why it causes lag on servers, that and also the constant lighting updates. And then we have the function that is the combination of piston tape and different operators, or logic gates. So I'll be right back to go over a couple of my circuits within my courses. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight to how I go about building them. Okay, and welcome back to the inner workings of Sarin. If you've played on this map, you'll know that one of its key features is changing pathways. And a lot of people are really intrigued by this. They think that it has to be some very complicated mechanism. It's actually very simple. See, right now we're below the floor of Shri. And the circuit broke again. Great. I have to adjust the timing. I'm not quite sure why it breaks, but I might have to expand this out. So let's go over what it does specifically first. So all these lines of redstone that are up here right underneath the floor, they connect to various pressure plates that are found throughout the maze. And those all just go through all over the place, and they eventually make their way over to here. And they go both down here and up into the ceiling. But let's go down here first. Now this is a monostable circuit. I don't know why this is here. This is the very simple monostable circuit that uses a piston to change any length of pulse into a single tick. Now I extend that single tick a little bit, but I think this is a bit much. That monostable circuit is often used to create two piston T flip-flops that are linear rather than tall. And that goes along its way to this piston tape here. It triggers the piston tape to cycle one block forward. And when it's actually working, which it isn't right now for some reason, which is really irritating, it should... Oops. I'm going to extend it, I think. I think that's what I need to do because I've switched to the redstone block. I think that's what's causing me problems. Boop. There we go. But it sends a signal through. I actually have to double check that that's the same signal. Okay. Let's see, this one's extended, so it's the only one that's off. So I need to make sure that that's the same one up top. So now we're on the roof, and this one is extended, so yes, I connected it properly. That's a good thing. I know it's not the one that's extended, it's the one that's not extended. But it's the same one that's not extended because, yeah. Okay, so I lined it up properly. Excuse me. Boom. So when this is actually working, the piston tape will actually cycle forward and move which pathway is the correct one. In Shri, it's any of the pathways that you go into has the potential to be the correct one. Now that's not saying a whole lot, because just because you get to the exit pathway doesn't mean you've actually found your way out, because as you can see in here, there's another 4 pathways to go along. And that's where the signal leading up from the monostable circuit, which shortens the pulse length if you remember, comes into play. So here's the output from that. It comes along here. Zoom! Let's see if this one's broken too. And it comes onto this complicated mess. And yes, it is broken as well. Oh boy. So I actually need to adjust this circuit to take into account the properties of the redstone block. I switched to the redstone block from redstone torches and a block of wool. Boom. And that's supposed to be empty. I switched over because I figured it would be a little bit less what's the word? Less update. I can't even think of the word I'm thinking of. A little bit more compact. There we go. But anyway, this one triggers which one of these 4 pathways leading up is correct. And the only way I could get it to work really was to make it so that, well, not really only way to make it work. The only way I could make it so you didn't get the same pathway with each pathway, if that makes sense. Each pathway combination wasn't the same, was to make it so each one of the sides can be connected to each of these 4. And that's where it gets a little bit more messy, but it's still not a very complicated circuit. As you can see, going up here, we have these torches to invert the signal. We start down here, inverts it once, inverts it twice, and outputs it. And each of these lines goes along to, if I follow it along here to show you, a basic OR gate with a NOT gate off of it. Now, on this one, I'm surprised to only see 2. Why is it only 2? It probably has combinations somewhere. Yeah, there's combinations along the way. But you can have input from either side. It will trigger this block, which will switch which door is open, which door is closed. And there are 2 doors per way up. 1 door leads to the exit, 1 door leads back to the start. So it's not entirely mean. But that's just Shri. Sarin is the older of the 2 courses that I put together. This was, I believe, my second course I built on the server, and it's evolved a little bit from its original form, but the maze itself has never changed. And this one is a little bit more basic. Actually, this isn't... Oh yes, it's correct. That's correct. I originally had it to where there were several input places and several T flip-flop... Wait, no, it wasn't even T flip-flops. It was... what was it? It was X NOR gates or XOR gates. I can't remember which one. I got the 2 switched in my head so many times. But it was one of those 2 gates that were connected to several points. Each one of these holes that you see here was originally one of those points. And it was my way of trying to make it randomly switch. And it wasn't all that random. It was very predictable, but it was one of my early redstone works, and I was proud of it. Now it's a little bit more basic than that and works a lot better. Whoops. But you can actually see this entire area that's down here from Shri. And up on the roof here, well, under the ceiling, is the same concept where there's pressure plates all over the place in Sarin. And it actually takes... Yes, it does take input from Shri as well, which is the most evil thing I could possibly do. I forgot to mention this branching point right here that goes up here. But Shri and Sarin both affect Sarin's outcome, which is why this is one of my most evil works on the server. Because not only can people in the same part that you're in affect what you're going to get in the end, it's also people who are in the previous part that are impacting you. Isn't that just fun? But I hope you guys got a little insight from that. Obviously, after it does all that stuff, collecting the inputs, it comes over to this T flip-flop here. And the T flip-flop leads to just a 2-piston change. Unlike Shri, Sarin only has 2 out of 4 entrances with potential to be correct. And I don't even remember which 2 they are. And no, it's not the most obvious choices here and here, because I'm not that easy to get around. But I actually do want to mention something else. When I first built this maze layer up here didn't exist. It was just, you reach these areas that are now nether brick, and they would branch off into these dropouts down here, and it wouldn't get very far, but it was a little bit less evil. You still had a 1 in 16 chance of getting the correct way, though. And if you have been here, if you've been to this maze, you hated it, even if you didn't beat it, I highly encourage you to come on down here. This is the city of X. If you had, let's see, I'm trying to remember which direction it is. There's actually a lot of old stuff in this city that is pretty neat to look at, so it's worth coming here anyway just for seeing what other people have built before. But let's see if I can give you something more recognizable to use as a reference point. Oh, the big block of TNT, that's very recognizable. And there's the house. This is where, I don't know if you still go, but you eventually get to. And from here, you just head along this direction, north, the north direction, I think they say? No, it's actually west. Signs are wrong. I believe the orientation changed a little bit since then, but you follow this pathway quite a bit. I originally designed the course for a space that was inside the TNT block, but the space was taken by someone else. Such is life. But I got a little space next to Sora, who taught me a lot of stuff about Redstone, so I'm very thankful for that. Especially since I got his help if I needed it. But you come all the way down here, and feel free to come on in and grab a sign and rant at me all you want, because I like this. And Potter is the only one that I have confirmation has beaten this course. So, hope you guys enjoyed this little video, and I'll see you next time.